Hi, I'm Elsie Hildebrand.
I'm her other half, Don Hildebrand.
We were asked to talk about some of the volunteer activities we've been involved with here at the church. And I thought I would start with Meals on Wheels. I think Meals on Wheels, as far as this church was concerned, started back in the early 1980s. We didn't move here until 1989. In about 1990, Bill Ellis recruited us to deliver meals, and he and his wife Ruth were in charge of getting volunteers for the Meals on Wheels program. At that time, it was the senior center was over on Comal Street in a small house, sort of behind the NBU parking lot. It was a very small house, and as I understand it, the meals were prepared there when it was first started. Harriet Sahlberger and Dorothy Kreshe both delivered meals in the early 1980s, and they picked up their meals from there. When we started in 1990, the first few times they were from that house, but after that we picked up the meals over at Edenholm. And the meals were prepared at Edenholm. We picked up a list of who was to get the meals at the little house, but then we picked up the meals over at Edenholm. And there were only 4 routes at that time, and each route had probably 6 to 8 clients. So at that time, that was all the meal program was. Shortly after that, the Senior Center bought the building that they're now located in over on Landis Street, and started doing the meals from there. We've been doing meals since 1990, and the first couple of years we just delivered meals, and then when Ruth Ellis got sick, we took over from Bill and Ruth and did the recruiting of meal delivery people. Right now they have about 15 routes, and each route has probably averages 10 to 12. Our church is responsible for 8 of those routes every Monday, and some Mondays there are 5 Monday. Every month there are some 5 Mondays, and so that means 40 teams of people to get volunteers for. We have 2 or 3 routes that have people delivering that are not from the church, but basically they are from the church. Some of the people that delivered back when it first started, some of you may remember the names: Joyce Billingsley and Jean Cooney, Jay and Martha Christ, Vic and Katie Spanenberg, Calvin Brazel, Jack and Ella Hall, Don and Valerie Meyer, Floyd and Ruth Annaball, Ruth and Glenn Holder. This was back in 1997 when these lists were current. In 2001 we had Pat Keys and Camilla Palmer, people who have been church members for a long time. Right now we're in charge of getting the volunteers for every Monday for 8 routes. Besides the meals program, we also deliver meals, or we also work at the food booth for Worst Fest 3 or 4 times each Worst Fest.
I didn't know they had a food booth there.
Right.
Money raising?
Right. So they get their volunteers from meal delivery and anybody that's a member of the Senior Center. We aren't Senior Center members, we just volunteer. I think that's about all I had on the meal program. You want to talk on Salvation Army and how you got started with that?
Well, yeah, just kind of a brief description. In 1993 or thereabouts, the Salvation Army presence here in New Braunfels consisted basically of one person who was a Salvation Army contact, and she worked out of the senior center. And she reported to a Salvation Army service representative that visited the town maybe 2 or 3 times a year. But in 1993, this person, I forget whether she got sick or had to go out of town, but for several months we had nobody. And the funding of the Salvation Army came from the what's our local
United Way.
United Way, came from United Way Fund. We were designated as a United Way recipient. And they, at that time, since we had no visible representation, they would not give the Salvation Army the funding. Peter Olson, who was the associate pastor at the First Protestant Church, took hold of this, and he got together 5 people who agreed to be on the board of directors. So basically we started up a new board, and we started having monthly meetings, and we got refunded by the United Way, and so pretty much it took off from there. We started developing regular policies and procedures, and practically all the income that we received went to helping people. We had no expenses of our own, and we generally met in churches, and there was no operating expenses. And it just kind of grew over the years, and it developed into what the Salvation Army called a service center, where that was one step up in the organization, and we got a little more contact with the Salvation Army, who was out of Dallas at that time, and it just kind of grew from there, and finally we were contacted by the Salvation Army out of Austin, and now then today we're part of the San Antonio district, and we've grown. The Salvation Army today has grown to where they have a building on Business 35, and they have a full-time lieutenant who is in charge of it, Sarah Gottlieb, which I think means godlich in German, and she runs it, and they have some paid help, and they still use a lot of volunteers, and it's pretty much operated under the direction of the Salvation Army out of San Antonio. So that's, in a nutshell, that's it.
I remember you telling me at one time all the money we raised in Comal County we got to use here from the kettle campaign.
That was in the kettle campaign, yes.
Okay, and only in the kettle campaign.
Yes, yeah, the Salvation Army financing is, when I was treasurer of it, 88% of it was used locally, 10% of it went to the state Salvation Army organization, and 2% went to the federal. And I think it's still that kind of a split.
Oh, the split. And I'm sure you saw a lot of growth in how much we took in the Red Kettle campaign.
Yes.
Yes. Well, the one thing I wanted to mention is that we really got visible after the flood of 1998 here in New Braunfels, where Dry Comal Creek flooded, and the Guadalupe River flooded, and there were so many houses that were flooded in New Braunfels. And at that time, the main Salvation Army organization came in to help here. And I think they had a mobile food unit that was in here for a number of weeks, mainly providing meals for volunteer workers. And then we had an influx of donations from people to help the people that were flooded. And so the state organization rented, I think it was a Piggly Wiggly, wasn't it, over in the Kroger store on Business 35, which is empty. They rented that, and that became a warehouse for all the donated material. And the State Salvation Army hired a person to come in there and run that, and that operated for, I don't remember how long, but it was 4 or 5 months, I think it operated. And the donations would come in there, and then people that were flooded that needed help, needed material things, they could come in there and get baby beds and just all kinds of stuff that was donated, clothing,
Cleaning supplies.
cleaning supplies, and so then that only lasted for so long, and then they left, and we got back to our regular organization again.
Well, I know my friend that was flooded said it was absolutely wonderful
Mm.
what the Salvation Army did. Said they just were wonderful to them.
But we had a number of individuals in New Braunfels and also companies that donated substantial amounts of money to help in that flood relief. And I was treasurer at the time, and I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it was somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. And all of that money, almost all of that money, was used to purchase building material that the New Braunfels Rebound Organization, which was formed to help to give manpower to help in this rebuilding for free.
Mm-hmm.
The Salvation Army supplied all of the materials for that.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
we were the only organization that really helped materially in that flood help. The Red Cross wasn't involved. They were invited, but they didn't want to get involved because their main help was with people that were victims of fire,
Oh.
and the floods wasn't their big thing, so they didn't get involved. So it was pretty much the Salvation Army was a big visible help here in New Braunfels
Mhm.
after the flood of '98.
No, I remember that.
And the kettle campaign started in 1996. The kettles were here in New Braunfels, but they came out of San Antonio. The people were hired to drive from San Antonio out here to work at the kettles, and they were paid for their expenses coming out and paid to bring. And since Don was on the board at that time, I went to meetings with him, and the Salvation Army here in town just found out that they were doing it and didn't know why. And when Peter contacted Salvation Army in San Antonio, they gave this unit about $2,000. And I was with Don at this meeting, and I said, I think we can do better than that if we do it ourselves. And you know, you shouldn't open your mouth. And they said, why don't you do it? So I sent out a letter, and I'm leaving a copy here, that I took personally to all the churches here in town, telling them what we were planning to do and trying to get them involved. It was a little slow at first, but they gradually, churches came on, and we set up a plan to do kettles. We had 2 doors at Walmart, not Walgreens, Kroger, not Kroger, Kmart. 2 doors at Walmart, Kmart, and Target at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Target later, through their national company, was told they couldn't do it any longer. And then, of course, Kmart moved out of town. So since then, it's been Walmart, Walgreens, and Hobby Lobby took over. Except Hobby Lobby isn't open on Sunday, and so we had 2 Walgreens on Sunday.
And Granzines.
And Granzines after a while, yes. So we started out with 4 kettles. In 1997, I took over recruiting people from our church, and up until this year, we rang 4 kettles, 4 days, 4 complete days. And we had it staffed completely. We gradually increased in dollar amount. I think a couple of years ago, I think the dollar amount that we got from the kettles was over $65,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it went up from the $2,000 to $65,000.
That Granzines was Granzines Meat
Only
Market,
on-
not Granzines
Right.
Barbecue.
And that was only on Friday and Saturday. But we set up the kettles every morning and took them down every night, and Don collected the kettles, changed out the kettles every afternoon.
Deposited the dough.
Well, the first few years, we counted every penny ourselves at home before we took it to the bank.
Wrapped the coins.
Wrapped even the pennies.
Oh, gosh.
When it got to be a little more money, we didn't wrap. We only wrapped the quarters, but we counted all the dollar bills before we took it to the bank. About 5 or 6 years ago, I guess maybe longer than that. They changed the policy. They didn't trust us, I guess, and they changed the policy, and we had to take it into the office to be counted. And so that's the way it's handled now. But this past year, I turned my recruiting duties over to Ralph Leal, so he was in charge this past Christmas. And talking about the rebound, you want to say a little more about the rebound?
Well, like we said before, it came out of the need for people that couldn't afford to pay for a contractor to come in and rebuild their house to help these people. And the help varied from some houses where the water only came up maybe a foot or two over the floor to some houses where it went all the way up into the ceiling. And so some of the rebuilding was quite extensive. You had to take all the drywall off, even up on the ceiling, and had nothing but wood framing in there, and you had to rebuild from there. And you usually had to rebuild the plumbing and do the wiring. And so I don't know exactly how rebound started. I think that maybe it was the St. Paul Lutheran Church that got people together for the original organization. And in the early start of it, there were several churches involved and people from several churches. But after a few weeks or a month or so, it pretty much worked down to where it was mainly the Methodist Church and the Methodist people.
Under Larry Phelps.
Under Larry Phelps. He was the ringleader of the construction crew. And at one time, I would guess he had maybe 15 people from our church working, not all on the same house because we'd work on multiple houses at the same time. And it was a big help to these people that couldn't afford to get their home rebuilt. Some cases it was the homeowners were invalid or incapacitated so that they couldn't do the work, and a lot of cases it was just they didn't have money to do it. So it was a big help for a lot of people.
I was on the rebound committee, and money was funneled through the First State Bank. Barry Williams was on that board, and Larry Phelps was the president of the committee, and any money that came in to rebound for a number of years was designated through that committee. And
If it went to rebound.
if it went to rebounds.
But some of it came through the Salvation Army, so it was.
But any money donated to rebound went through that committee. Larry Phelps and Dick Humphreys, Ray Prose and Gene Goodall, and it was mostly Methodists that worked on it, with a few Lutherans and some winter visitors helped with the rebound too.
Sounds like you did a lot of good.
Habitat, we didn't do much with Habitat. The first house we worked a little bit with, but not as much as with the flood relief. Directories, you asked me to talk about the directories. I've done the last 5 directories with the help of Sue Prosen. She and I work very well together. We worked with Olin Mills and Life Touch, and we had free reign to do what we wanted, mostly. We had to get the photographer schedule to meet ours and sign people up, and a lot of people in church helped with the signing in and getting it all organized. the part I disliked the most was putting it all together at the end. I enjoyed being at the photography sessions and meeting all the people because it's a good way to get to know the congregation.
I didn't realize you had to put it all together at the end.
At the end, it's the worst part because you have to. Amber worked on that.
Build a book.
Amber worked on that, and Jolene Oyer worked on it one year. The first few I did, but I told him after a while I would do the leg part, but somebody else would put it together because you have to have a little more knowledge than I do. I've worked at SOS for about 10 years, once or twice a month. Worked at Soup Kitchen for a few years. I think it's been completely disbanded now. Otherwise, we both usher at Braunfels Theater. We work at the Chamber Visitor Center once or twice a month.
You find something to keep yourselves busy.
Right. I worked at Hope Hospice for about 5 years in the office and in the resale shop. Haven't done that for a while, but between that and travel, we stay pretty busy.
Very good. Thank you for all the work you've done in the community and really that's mission work we're doing here.
We
We're
enjoy
in the
it.
community.
It's not going to get us into heaven, though.
You're right. I agree.
Well, Don sings in the early choir, and they both usher from time to time, and they do other things in the church.
That's right.
Yeah.
They do. Keep busy. Well, thank you.
We wouldn't
very
be happy
much.
if we weren't.
I understand that. Understand that.